Some of you may be interested in hearing my experiences going digital, moving from a Pentax LX to the Pentax K-1, which is a full frame body. Here they both are, both with 85 1.4 lens. And you can see that the K1 is larger, it's certainly heavier. You can see on top, hopefully. And from the side, it likes to focus on my eyes, so I shall bring them closer. This isn't a review of the K1. It's got far too much going on for me to review it. But let me tell you what happened. In the film days, I was into Pentax and kind of ended up with the LXs and a number of lenses. They have some great lenses over many years. Ended up with a number of lenses. And then, well, digital came along and I was a film diehard like a lot of people. I was on the forums, people saying they're not going to move, because digital wasn't that great to start with, obviously. Time went on and Pentax were very slow in bringing out any digital cameras anyway, and when they did, they were smaller sensor ones. And on the forums they're saying we're waiting for full frame. We waited and waited and waited and pretty much gave up. In the meantime, I stopped using them so much. Quite expensive with film and the processing. Also, I didn't realise at the time that my eyesight was deteriorating, so I was getting lots of shots which weren't focused properly. Anyway, life went on and the whole thing kind of petered out, really. So there I was, I started selling off some of the cameras, some of the lenses, some of the lesser lenses, slowly intending to probably go the whole way. But then a full frame body came out, the K1, but it was very expensive. And I was into other things mostly. Fairly recently, this one, I needed to do some photography for various things, products and so on, and didn't really have anything. The phone. Phones are great, but... And this came out, and it accepted, it was full frame, and accepted the lenses I already had. It was second hand, and here it is. So I'm going to tell you just my experiences. I'll tell you, firstly, I use it like the LX. I don't use the screen on the back after shooting. I leave it switched off and then look later. Other than that, I've got it set up pretty much like the LX. On the LX I used mostly either fully manual. I'd set obviously the ISO, the shutter speed and the aperture. And then often I'd use Aperture Priority, which these A-series lenses, which I have a number of, luckily, just by chance. This works with the M-series, which were around when this came out, and the A-series was slightly later, but so it didn't use the A. Yes, it did use the A function, of course, for Aperture Priority. So I mostly had those. No, it doesn't use the A setting. I beg your pardon. It sets the shutter speed according to the aperture you've set. So I'd set my aperture, what I wanted, and leave it to choose the shutter speed, keep an eye on it, make sure it was, reasonable for what I wanted. This one, though, because I have the A-series lenses, this one can set everything if you leave it in fully auto, but I tend to leave it on auto on the aperture, and I can change the aperture with a wheel on the back. So I don't use the aperture ring, I leave it set on auto, but this effectively is the aperture ring on the back. So yeah, really I use it in the same way. Before I get confused, let me look at my notes. What I like about it is it's not a mirrorless camera, it has a viewfinder. I use a viewfinder. You can use live view on the back, but I just can't see it. I've set this to my eyesight. It didn't go far enough, and if you see my other video, I've cut out a monocle. Was it a monocle? Or maybe some reading glasses, cheap reading glasses, but with a reasonable lens. And I'd cut the centre out and I've stuck it on there, within there, so that this is now in the middle because it didn't go quite far enough. The LX didn't go anywhere near far enough, but I've done the same. I've got the K-1 hood, or a Pentax hood, and again, stuck whatever it is I need in there. So this now, I can focus. As I said before, I didn't realise that I wasn't really nailing the focus because of that. So that's great. It can use the A lenses, which I like. Very useful. It can use all of the lenses. It can use the M lenses, which without the auto, but that means you have to use fully stop down. And that's just a bit of faff too far for me. But it can use them, but you have to have a slightly slower way of working, which I'm lucky I've got mostly A lenses just by chance. Are there any drawbacks and benefits? So I'll tell you one of the benefits immediately. When I first got this, a lot of them weren't in focus, which is why I realised what was going on here with the eyepiece. Secondly, obviously camera shake and a few other things. What I could do is shoot and immediately come in and look on the computer and be disappointed, but it didn't cost me anything. And look, then I'd set up a tripod, do test shots with focusing, because I wanted to really test this because it's second-hand, make sure there wasn't an issue with the camera. And I realised there wasn't, but it was me. So that's been very useful to be able to do that. Just come in, load them up, delete them, load them up, delete them, practice, 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 and see, that's what I need to do. Advantages then? Well, obviously, that's a big one. Being able to practice and it not cost you anything, and to be able to remember, because I come straight in and do it. If I'd practiced on the LX, you send it off, have it processed, it comes back a week or so later. I look at them, unless you've been meticulous and taken notes, I look at them and think, they all look rubbish, but what was I doing there? So very useful. Very useful also, because I can then, once I'm practiced in, apply that to the LX and hopefully get more keepers. I've got a roll of film in here, which I've got a few more to take and then get developed, and we'll see. But I have no reason to believe that my film shots won't be better because of the practice I can do with this. Certain lenses which I never used, like the macro, I'm using a lot. Again, because you can try, rubbish. Next day, try, and then you get some good ones as you learn, and as some of it's luck. Shutter speed goes up to a 1/8000th. This one goes up to 1/2000th. It's a strange word, or a difficult word for me anyway. It has stabilization, apparently up to 5 stops. I plan to do a test on that, really, see what difference it makes. Obviously makes some, I believe. Has effectively a built-in motor drive, or at least winder, whereas this you'd have to have, I've got one but I'm going to sell it, that bolts on the bottom, screws on the bottom. But again, you're going to get through a load of film, and if they're not good, you spend a lot of money for not very much, whereas this, of course, you can just delete. So it has that, which is great. It seems to me to be very well built. It's weather sealed. The LX is weather sealed as well. How weather sealed it is now after however many years, I don't know, maybe that things deteriorate, but this seems to me to be very well built. I'm pleased with that. Everything seems to be consistent when you switch things on. It's not different one time from the other. Nothing seems to rattle. The batteries last a long time, even though they're relatively used. No complaints really. It's quite heavy, heavier than the LX. Depends on the lens you've got, of course. With these lenses on, both of them are quite substantial, but this one's noticeably heavier. But you know, it's not a street camera anyway. So there you go. Anything irritating? Not really. Would be nice to have a touch screen, perhaps. I use the screen for the settings that comes on the back. I've set it up for me quite simplistically. Most of the stuff I don't use. You can shoot RAW. I use JPEGs. Can take 2 cards. I use JPEGs and only really need the one card. I've got another one there just in case, I suppose. of the things I do use, I've got this set to ISO. So if I'm looking, so of course that's another benefit, is I'm pretty much stuck to whatever film I've got in there on this one. Whereas on this I can go from 100 to, I don't know, I don't really go faster than 6004. 3002 looks pretty good to me. And you can push it beyond that, it starts to deteriorate, whether you like that or not, or whether it'll get you out of jail maybe. So yeah, ISO is variable, more of a range of shutter speeds. It doesn't have the extremely long shutter speeds of the LX. The LX measures the light off the film when the shutter's open, and sometimes before, off the curtain. But if you're doing a long exposure, it actually measures in real time off the film. It doesn't say it in the manual. I think it says up to 30 seconds or 30 minutes, I'm not sure. But actually, many people have left it in darkness. It'll just stay open for almost forever, like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, measuring the film. Of course, you get reciprocity failure on the film, but I don't use that really. So, was it worth the wait? Well, it's been a long, long wait. But if you're thinking about it and you're on the film cameras and you've got some of the A lenses or the M lenses, but the A lenses work better or easier to use, then yes, the Viewfinder. Let me compare right now. I'm a Viewfinder type person. Yeah, looks good to me. Let me compare it to the LX. I'm just sort of looking at the size of it and the brightness and so on and the clarity for focusing. Maybe the LX has a slight advantage. Maybe the LX has a slight advantage, but the Viewfinder is great. So the things for me is that really I use it like the LX with, for me, a few useful extras and a hell of a load of other stuff that I may or may not get into. But of course I'm free to experiment because it doesn't cost me. It just costs me time. I'm free to experiment with that. So I would say really, yeah. If you've got those good, and they are great, those Pentax A series lenses and the star lenses, they are great. Some chromatic aberration, so purple fringing on some of them and the others, but that's really the thing to watch out for, as I said in the other video, is of course you're on a computer screen now, and the computer screen itself is bigger than any prints I ever had off the LX. And then you start zooming in. So you start pixel peeping, as they call it, so you start seeing all this stuff and thinking, oh, that could be, but really, you're not going to use it like that. Quite large files, but that's great because it means you can crop in as well and still get very good quality because it's a 30-something megapixel sensor. So I'd say to you, yes, go ahead if you can find a good deal second-hand. And as I say, another advantage for me is if you're going to continue with your film camera, you can use this to practice and experiment, get very familiar with the lens and what the particular lens does and so on and so forth. And then when you come to your film camera, you're liable to get more keepers. I imagine because you're practiced and you've realised that you need to adjust the diopter to whatever it is. So I'm very pleased with it and would recommend it as a digital LX, really.